Hi, Dick. How are you?
Hi, George. Very good. Thank you. Honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm so glad that you accepted our invitation to be interviewed on the for the Training Master Series.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I've traveled to China before. I've seen what you've accomplished in China. I'm deeply impressed with it. And that makes me even more honored to be here, to be interviewed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just continue that topic. When did you come to China? What's the last time you were in China?
Well, the last time, probably 9 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, as a tourist. The
Mm-hmm.
first time was in the mid 80s. And it was to give a talk at one of your conferences about media in education.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, right after not too long after the Cultural Revolution, actually, and China was ramping up again, getting its educational system reorganized and so on, and it was a very exciting and very challenging time. Then I came again about 5 years. I've been there about every 5 years until about 5 or 7 years ago. So maybe 5 times, 4 times, 5 times, I think.
Wow.
But always more or less as a tourist, a curious tourist.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So what city have you been? You remember?
That's the terrible thing. I certainly remember Beijing and Shanghai. That's where I spent most of my time. I even took a
Uh-huh.
little tour from the canal that goes from Shanghai up towards Beijing. And I've seen quite a bit of the tourist China, but
Mm-hmm.
not a great deal of what you would say the non-tourist China. But
Well, for sure, after this interview, in the future, when you come to China, we'll sure be, we'll not let you go easy. We'll
thank you.
ask you, grab you, and then you must speak at one of our conferences, because there are so many conferences going on. And
For
so you
sure.
are going to be a guest speaker for sure next time.
Thank you.
And yeah, so for our audience, Dick, would you please introduce yourself a little bit to us, where you grew up, where your hometown is, and where did you go to college, what did you study, and how did you come here today?
Oh, wow, that's a long story. I'll try to keep it short. I grew up in a very small town in Michigan. Michigan's a
Okay.
state up by the Canadian border, by our Great Lakes, and a
Which
wonderful,
town?
what's that? Oh,
Which
Howell,
town?
it was called
Oh,
Howell,
yeah, I know that. A
between
little bit.
Detroit and Lansing.
Yes, yes.
About 3,000 people when I was born there. Um, Went to school there and then left there after my secondary school and went to the University of Michigan for
Mm-hmm.
undergraduate school. I did undergraduate work in history and political science. Went on for a master. I got interested in media at that point. Don't ask me why. I don't even remember why. I decided I wanted to go into journalism. And so I went to the University of Pennsylvania to the
Mm-hmm.
Annenberg School of Communications to get a master's degree. While I was there, I eventually took a job in television as a producer and a cameraman. I worked for the NBC station, the local commercial station. I worked for the educational station also. And I also directed some programs in New York on their educational station, ones that the university sponsored, of course. Went on from there after a master's degree. I realized I wanted a doctorate. I got interested in doing research and teaching. So I applied and got a nice fellowship. I had very little money. I grew up in a poor family. I paid for my own way through school, more or less, and with scholarships. And so I ended up going to Indiana University, which, as you may know, has the largest and maybe the most famous educational technology program. And I did a combination of educational technology and educational psychology. Got my degree in both areas. And after that, I went on to start to teach. I went from there to Stanford University once I finished my doctorate. I went as head of technology for a number of the research centers and also as an instructor. I taught at Stanford University in Palo Alto. Um, I had a wonderful time. I learned a huge amount. It's a very good university and they're very demanding. Met a lot of very bright people. Decided I wanted to be a professor full-time and not manage technology so much. So I took a job at Syracuse University. Syracuse is in New York, upstate New York, and as head of their doctoral program in educational technology, I also had an appointment in psychology at the time. I was professor of psychology also. Went from, after just a few years, 3 years actually, at Syracuse, I went on to a job I stayed in for many, many years. I went to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Very international city, actually, for the United States. More people living outside of their home country in one city than any other place in the United States.
Wow.
Which is kind of interesting. I mean, 20 million people, but they come from all over the world, literally. And really enjoyed the University of Southern California. I became chair of the educational technology program for some years. I developed a training center, the Center for Cognitive Technology, along with some very bright students and colleagues. So we took training grants. We took grants to do research and development work and training. My specialty has always been training and media, and all of the things that go along with that, cognitive psychology and measurement, those sorts of things. As I moved along in my career at the University of Southern California, I decided that I was going to develop an evidence-based training and task analysis system. And so I did. And the task analysis system, which we called cognitive task analysis, got a huge amount of attention. I'll describe that in greater detail if you like, not right this minute, but that cognitive task analysis, we did the research on it as we were developing it in the medical school. The reason we did that is because there were a lot of disputes about, we based cognitive task analysis on trying to capture the expertise of the top experts in any job. Our field, our sense is that one of the great resources that a business has is the people who are the best at what they do. They're consistently successful, cooperating with their work unit, producing what needs to happen, and doing that without a lot of error and consistently. So I focused on how do we capture information from those people that we can put into training. And one of the things that happened quite early is that we discovered, we weren't the only ones, but we discovered that that our knowledge is only about 25% to 30% conscious. That what human beings know how to do is 70% unconscious. And that 70% is a huge amount of very important things that we learn how to do, but learn it so well that it becomes automatic and we do it without thinking about it. And we apparently do that because our conscious minds are very small spaces to think in. We can only think about 2 or 3 things at once. But to do a complex job, we have to be aware of many more things. So most of what we do when we work in areas where we have experience is automated. So our challenge was to try not to just get what we usually get from an expert in task analysis, which is what they're aware of doing, but what they're not aware of doing that's so critical. And our theory at the time was that a lot of students have difficulty after training because we actually, even though we intend to give them everything, because an expert is not aware of a lot of what they know, they have to discover it for themselves, and therefore they have to make a lot of mistakes. So we validated the system, we decided, by choosing surgeons. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. Surgeons do things with their hands and their minds. And we wanted to include people that did things with their hands in this task analysis system. So, and what surgeons do with their minds is pretty elaborate. So, and also we know who are experts in surgery because we keep records of what they do when they do surgery. In this country, it's required that all surgeons, their experience in surgery becomes a matter of public record. When they make a mistake, it has to be written down and available to people. When they do things well, also it's recorded. So we knew who the top experts were. So the people we chose to validate this system were the top experts teaching surgery in the School of Medicine. Those same surgeons also continued to teach student surgeons. We took half of all of the student surgeons when we had done a cognitive task analysis and found out how to do a surgery. And half of those students were taught by the surgeons that we had interviewed with cognitive task analysis. And the other half were taught by me and one of the physicians who was there. He was not a surgeon, interestingly enough. And then when those students, those 100% of all the students went out into the hospital to practice what they'd learned, somebody was recording how they performed during each one of these surgeries who did not know how they'd been trained. And then we kept track of their patients over a year's time, and we published an article that made a huge impact in the United States. I think it's one of the most popular articles on research in surgery and training, because we found that our surgeons learned 45% more. They learned it in 25% of the time. I'm sorry, with 25% less time. In other words, it took them only 75% of the time it took the others to learn something. They made no serious errors when they went in to do the surgery. And we knew how many people died typically from this surgery in the first year after students came out of their surgical program. So our surgeons didn't kill anybody. They didn't make any serious mistakes. They didn't hurt anybody. And they liked what they did. They had more confidence, and they were quicker to transfer what they had taken out of training. Well, that got the attention in a very major way of surgeons. So I was offered a joint appointment in the surgical department as a professor and worked there for about 15 years, actually, along with my appointment in psychology and in education. So that started us off on what was a long career of doing cognitive task analysis, not just in the university, but in businesses and in different countries. I worked in Ireland, I worked in Germany, I worked in England, I worked in different countries doing this. I got curious about were there cultural differences in how we had to do this process. So that became a very big part of my research. Now, I did other things. I mean, it wasn't only cognitive task analysis. I got interested in training design, and I have worked in an area that now is being called fully guided learning. And I wrote the article on it with a colleague in the Netherlands and another colleague in Australia. We wanted to make the point that it was based on research that had occurred in a number of different countries, albeit that they were obviously English-speaking countries. But we made a requirement of ourselves that we looked at all of the research on instruction and learning in every language that could be, where articles could be translated to English. And so we published this article, which, by the way, I think it was 06 when we did 2006 when we did the first publication. I think it's still the most cited article in instructional research in the United States. So a lot of people have read it. So that was the second area I got involved in. Now, as I'm working in those two areas, I also became interested in what technology contributes to all this. And in the 1980s, I wrote an article where I made the claim that media doesn't really make any difference in learning. I gave an analogy that many people remember. And the analogy was that media is like the truck that delivers groceries to the market. The truck is not responsible for the nutrition of the people that shop at the market, all right? The truck only delivers the groceries, and it has to have features that are for frozen food and for different kinds of food, but basically it doesn't affect nutrition. And then I showed the evidence that it was something called instructional methods or instructional or training strategies, such as demonstrating something, getting people to practice, giving them feedback that corrects their practice as they're going through it. That sort of thing was what actually helped learning. But we made the claim that you could do all those things on almost any medium. And so we had to separate two things. Media, which is a matter of access to instruction. It helps access. Media gets things to more people more quickly, we know. And China is one of the greatest examples of that, in my view. You've used it better and more than almost any country in the world, more extensively anyway. And secondly, that it can be done with less cost. If you amortize the cost of training one student or one employee over thousands, the cost of doing it on media is so much cheaper than it is to do it with live trainers. And so those were the two benefits of media in our view. And you still, I think, can teach most things, provided that you have an asynchronous. In other words, provided that the media instruction is a live connection between some instructor and a student, so that if the student demonstrates something, the instructor can give them immediate feedback about how they're doing. So now then, I made one more step, and then I'll quit. One of my professors, actually, from my graduate program, challenged me. He read my article on media and methods and that sort of thing, and what I'd done, and he said, you know, you've made it real clear what doesn't work. Why don't you spend more time on what needs to be done, what does work beyond the instructional design? And so I reasoned about it and said, I've never said anything about motivation. So in the last 5 to 7 years, I've gotten deeply into the literature, the international literature on how people are motivated, what motivates them, what happens when they lose motivation at work. And I'm very interested in work as well as educational setting. And just last year, a colleague of mine named Bror Saxberg and I wrote an article that got published in the Harvard Education or the Harvard Business Review. Now, the Harvard Business Review in this country is probably the top business journal available.
In the world as well.
When you publish an article in there, it gets big attention. I think 120,000 people downloaded the article the first day that it appeared in the journal. So we get a lot of attention from that particular piece. So that's the latest in my approach. We developed a system we called the Beck model, B as in Baker, E as in Edward, C as in Charlie. And that stands for belief, expectancy, and control. Those are the 3 factors in our model of how to, and we made it very applied. And we made it for people in work, and we made it to do this. Here is the definition of motivation. Here's how you identify whether you're motivated or not. When you're not motivated, one of these 3 things is what you're not doing. And here's how you correct yourself. It's the reason, there's 4 different reasons why people are not motivated. And you have to look at all 4 and then adjust what it is that's causing you not to be motivated. Or somebody else, if you're going to be helping someone else. If you're a line supervisor and you're trying to help somebody that you feel has a motivation problem, then here's the things to do. And so that's my story, I think, up until now. I'm retired. I retired from the university in 2005, but I continue to work at the university. I have an emeritus professorship. I have grants, and currently I have a grant from a very high level in this country to do an artificial intelligence version of cognitive task analysis. And we are in the first year of that effort. Very challenging. I'm learning a huge amount about artificial intelligence. And I have begun to think it's the most promising thing for the future, in my view. I know that many countries are starting to invest in it. Many countries have realized how important this might be. I don't think in general, most of us in learning and development realize how much it's going to affect us in our field. So I'm getting a firsthand view of how to do this and the challenges in doing it. I think I'll stop there. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but there it is.
Yes. Thank you, Dick. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. You hit on so many of the key areas that I'm interested in, and I guess our audience will be interested in too. And so let me smaller questions first. What's the year that you have the fully guided learning published?
It was 2006, I think.
2006. Okay.
I think it was 2006, yes. And then a number of people objected to it. It actually is quite different than what is very popular in a lot of places in this country. What's very popular here is something I call discovery learning. Discovery learning means you give people a problem at work and you put together a team and you say, go solve the problem. And our view is if you didn't have a solution to that problem, that's probably a good way to solve it. But if you know how to solve it, it's better to teach people how to do it. And in order to learn that, you have to teach them step by step. You have to show them a demonstration of how. You have to get them to practice by giving them a problem that they can solve that's like the one they saw demonstrated. You have to give them feedback while they're doing it. And you have to check to make sure that they're going to transfer it to the job when they're finished.
Yeah, the fully guided learning, is that very similar to problem-based learning? Like,
well, the interesting thing is that we objected to problem-based learning as it was currently being practiced. We had a long title for this thing. If I can find it, I'll read it to you. I don't remember what it was, but one of the things we said was that problem-based learning has failed. Now, I like problem-based learning, but the difficulty is that it only works if the people that get the problem have enough prior knowledge to solve the problem. And people talk about scaffolding. They use the term scaffolding, like building a scaffolding around a building. But scaffolding means that you have to provide people with knowledge that's at the level just beyond what they currently know. And most of the problem-based learning did not actually measure what people knew that was related to the task and when they did, they didn't do it very accurately. So our view was that it wasn't working because people still had to fill in blanks of what they didn't know. They had to discover what they needed to know to take advantage of the problem-based learning that they were receiving. And we showed evidence from medicine, from law, from all kinds of training in the professions. The problem-based learning, the certain people were failing at problem-based learning, a large number of them for that reason.
Is that in China, though, there's a term called action learning. Yeah. Action learning is very popular in China. Do you see there's a similarities between?
Would you define it for me? Because I've heard a number of definitions. And what I've heard is that action learning means they have to get their hands on something and actually have experience with it. Is that it? So an action means they really have to be physically involved with it in some way. And yeah. I think if it's a task that involves your hands, yes. But if it's not, most learning, most work is here in your mind. And you have to have your mind active. And that's the argument that we've had, is that cognitive action is probably as important or more important than physical action.
Action learning in China is very loosely defined. They also draw some references from some British or American scholars in the past, but not very prominent schools of thought. And action learning, in my view, and most of the people's view, that they just kind of a learner-centric from, in the old days, it was instructor-centric, and everything, including students, sit around, orbit around the instructor. And now is student-centric. So your guidance, learning materials, your library, your instructor is one of the factors. So everything, job aid, everything is surrounding the students. And then we put students in the middle, and then they have to, instead of in the past, like duck feeding, instructed the old ways of teaching, especially in China, the Confucius way of teaching. And then you have to get students involved, get them to move and to participate, to put into action, let's demonstrate a lot of behavior, let them move instead of just sitting there, and then they're here, not here.
Yeah.
They're here, they're not here.
Yep. And that, of course, that still goes on in the university mostly, and that it's a mistake, really. There has to be a focus on both students and whatever they're being taught by, whether it's a person or a computer or whatever. We have to always be thinking about the interaction between the two, not just one, but both.
Exactly. And you just said PBL is failed, and PBL is failed is because of the measurement and the entry knowledge. The entry knowledge, or the problem presented students, and it's so is action learning is the same thing.
I think they're both great ideas. I don't want to discourage them totally, because the solution is always that people have to be active mentally and physically. People have to have problems that they try to solve, but they have to have them in the context where it's going to benefit them. You know, one of the things that I'm known for is that I published an article many years ago where I made the claim that if you train people wrong, you can make them less knowledgeable after training about that topic than they were before they started. And I showed evidence from 70 different studies where bad training actually produced people who knew less. Their post-test was lower significantly than their pre-test in the training.
They're more confused even after the training.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So why matter?
So this to me is an argument for being very careful when we train, because we think we can't do any damage, but in fact we can. And because we don't carefully measure what people are able to do before and after, we don't know when it happens. So, you know, in every profession can cause problems for people. In the medicine, you can make a person more sick. There's actually a name for it. It's called iatrogenic illness in English, iatrogenic. And it means the surgeon made a mistake and hurt this person, or the doctor made a mistake, gave them the wrong medicine, and they got even sicker. And so I'm saying that trainers can cause iatrogenic problems.
I think in the training should adopt what you have said previously, that in the medicine occupation has that they have the proclamation, right? They have the from the old ancient Greek, what it called? I forgot it. There's a claim like the doctor's doctrine, like make no.
Oh, first you should. It's a Socrates. I think it's. You should first do no harm.
First do no harm.
That's the first principle of medicine.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think
it should be our principle also.
It's the same with what you just said in training, like make no further harm. And if people get trained, and even after training, they got more confused. And why matter? You know, why didn't train in the first place? So
Harold Stolovich, one of the trainers here that I think you're going to interview, has a wonderful little book. It's called Telling is Not Training.
Oh, Harold Stolovich.
Harold, yeah. So his point is that most trainers tell people about things. And telling them doesn't work. It's like you have to show them how to do it. You have to make sure that they can do it. And if you just tell them, you find that about 10% of your trainees can do it. You have about 10% of people that are knowledgeable and they're bright. They probably shouldn't be in the training in the first place, but they can go out and succeed. And then trainers say, oh, well, the other 90% were lazy. They were stupid. And when in fact, no, that's not the case. It's most likely the other 90% got bad training. And some of those 90% might now be in worse shape than they were before the training began.
Yeah, let's come back to cognitive CTA, cognitive task analysis. Yes, will you please, you told us a little bit about cognitive task analysis, and throughout your earlier career, cognitive task analysis was one of the major research area. And can you define it for us and give us a few examples?
Yeah, cognitive task analysis is a strategy for interviewing top experts in a field to determine how they do the most important tasks that you want to train people to do like they do it. Mm-hmm. And what we learned in these interviews is that experts will tell us anything that they can see themselves doing. You know, you can imagine yourself, you can watch your hands when it does things. So, and you can sort of step back from yourself and remember what you did. Here's what you can't do. You can't observe what went on in your mind.
Exactly.
You can't directly observe it. You can remember some things that you thought about or think about, but it turns out, as I said before, we learned that 70% of all the analysis, all the decisions that experts make so quickly are totally unconscious. In other words, experts don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And they may want to tell you everything, but they don't. So we interview them in a way that we try to capture that. And one of the things that we look for are decisions. It turns out that experts can't tell us about the most important decisions that they make. And so we're highly alert when we're interviewing them. We'll often say, Can that be done a different way? Or are there conditions where you do something else next? Let me give you a quick example. When in one of the interviews we were doing in surgery, a procedure that involves giving rapid transfusions of liquid to people that are very badly injured, we found out that experts were only telling us one place to insert the needle to do this rapid infusion. We got all the way through the task analysis, and a junior surgeon said to us, well, wait, I saw a surgeon do that differently yesterday. So, and I said, what was happening and so on. And this person had been in an accident, and the area that was damaged was the area that the surgeon told us to put the needle in. So we went back to the expert surgeons and said, is there another way you can do it? It turned out there were 2 other ways to do it. And we found out that surgeons that had been trained in the standard way were never taught those other ways. And we began to realize that some people were actually dying after trauma because a surgeon who'd been well-trained in a good school of surgery didn't know that there were other places where they could insert this needle. That was not the only time we discovered something like that, by the way. And so it turned out that capturing these decisions was a key part of the contribution that we made. And by the way, a lot of people have looked at the data about this 70% unconscious. And everybody, after they look at it, and that includes the federal government in this country, they actually, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, when Obama was president, President Obama, actually got the system, got excited about it, and they hired a group of people to look at all the research and to tell them whether it was valid or not, what was wrong with it. And the people that did came back and said, this isn't good, this is amazing, this works. They then went to the federal agencies and said, you should be doing this, and all the federal agencies refused. They were trainers, they knew already how to do task analysis, they didn't need it. And so one of the people who was in the federal government at that time, who's now head of a big foundation, was the one who gave us the grant for the artificial intelligence version. His view was it takes a long time to learn how to do this. It requires a lot of knowledge of psychology, and it's probably better to have an artificial intelligence agent do these interviews. So that's what we're working towards now.
Wow. So the unconscious, you said it's unconscious decisions making, and
it's primarily decisions and analysis. Yeah.
Business analysis, and I remember there's a application case about it around it is that the trained eye, you know, when we term it, you know, in plain English, the trained eye. I read an article. It's one of those books I think is Thinking Fast and Slow. You know, one of those.
Yeah, and the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, probably it was in that book or a series of those small books, and then he said. You know, the most trained eyes are those you know, archaeologists or some, you know, people who are in the antique business. And then they can tell from years of training, from their neural system. And then as soon as they saw that artifact, and then they can tell, is that a real thing or is that a fake? You know, from the ancient Greek statue or, you know, something like that. And then they can tell by guts, you know, their gut feeling. Is that but
you see, it's what we call gut or what we call instinct is not gut instinct. It's a huge amount of prior experience that's been automated. And they have what I call pattern recognition skills when they look at something. They can see a pattern in things that, well, let me give you my example. About 6 months ago, I was out looking, I'm interested in fossils. So, and I go, it gives me an excuse to get out and walk, but I go look for a fossil. And I'm walking with a person who is an archaeologist and a paleobiologist. So I'm picking up what looked like fossils to me, and I see this. He points at something and says, oh, wow, you know what that is? And it looked to me like a big gray rock. That's it. He said, that is most likely a very old whale skull. So he went over and he looked at it and he said, yes, it is. And by the way, after that, he made a call. He got students in a truck and they came and took it away to the university. I still looked to me like a big old dumb gray rock. I couldn't see anything different. And I've been hunting fossils many years. I think I've learned a little bit, but obviously not anywhere near his class of ability.
So, I never know that. was so interested in archaeology, but here we go. I mean, by accident, I ran into it.
There you go. And in every field, this is true, by the way. These
Yes.
people have extraordinary knowledge that they have gained, and we say, oh, it's just their gut. They were born with that skill. No, sorry. It took a huge amount of work over a very long period of time, and they had to be driven to be successful at it. They had to not accept it when they make a mistake.
When we interview, and then I tell well, right now, you know, I learned English when I was a kid, and when I interview anybody, and then I ask them, you know, about their English skills, as soon as they say, hello, hi, how are you? That's it. And then I know where they are. I tell them, I know where you are. I know how much effort I put into study English.
Well, your English is extraordinary. It really is unusually good.
Thank you, sir. But that's, I mean, that's, I think that appears again and again in our daily lives, and then experienced eyes, the masters, and then we call it Chifu, you know, and the Kung Fu Panda, you know, in the animation movie, the Chifu, he knows every move you make is in his eyes. I think it's what is called, is that what you called the pattern recognition? Like
pattern recognition, yeah.
Pattern,
and some of it is cognitive, because one of the things that characterizes top experts is that they can witness a number of events and they don't see a pattern right away. But when those events occur one after the other, and there's slight differences between them, they'll start noticing a pattern embedded in them that nobody else has ever noticed before. And that's because they don't have to pay conscious attention to all the things that they've seen before. Those things are registered automatically in their minds because they've done it so many times. What they see is what's unusual. One of the things I noticed about top surgeons is the only thing they talked about was something unusual happening in surgery.
Right.
Oh, we opened this man this morning and his heart was on the other side.
Right.
And then they would get all excited about that. Why? Because they hadn't seen it very often.
Right. Is that what we call a daily chore?
The what? Sorry, the daily tour.
Something like that. And then you learn something about when things only go extraordinary. Extraordinary.
You know, I think it's one of the reasons why it's a good idea for experts to get together with experts in other fields and just chat. I mean, they learn a huge amount by doing that. By listening to other people and trying to make connections between what they're doing and seeing things in a different way. It's very productive, I think.
I am doing that right now, actually. I'm learning a lot from you.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm interested in different people who differ different things for the same reason. I'm with you on that. It's also the case, by the way, that I'm driven by evidence. And so I've tried very hard in my whole career only to pay attention to things that have solid evidence for them. And I argue strongly for evidence-based work and training in the United States. And it doesn't happen very often here, I'm sorry to say.
We'll come back to them, and that's my next question. But just to finish up this one,
okay.
The CTA, the unconscious knowledge, does that have anything to do? Because, you know, I'm making decisions just, you know, on the go. The first time I look at it, I know it is right or it is not right. You know, the way it should be or the way I've not done it before. And does that have anything to do with the long-term memory, the LTM?
Yes, because there's two kinds of memory, long-term memory. One is conscious memory, things that you can recall and say. In English, it's called declarative knowledge because you can declare it, you can say it. And then unconscious or implicit knowledge, which is not sayable. It's not describable because you can't recall it. You can do it, but you can't recall. You don't know that you do it. All right, so there's one thing. Second thing is that people make very few decisions, it turns out. They think they make decisions, but they don't. And the way we know that is that in MRIs, in neuroscience, when people are hooked up to electrical monitors on their brain, like the magnetic imaging, we know what happens in people's brains when they make a decision. So we give people problems. We say, you're going to have to decide between these three options. And let me tell you the options, and then you think about it a bit and tell me what decision you're going to make. The moment they hear the millisecond where they hear the third option, they've made the decision, but they're not aware that they have. So they'll think about it, and then they'll tell you what their decision is, and it's the one they already made. But they think they didn't make it until they decided to. That is a bit frightening about the amount of control we have over our own cognitive processes. My son is a head of a research center in neuroscience. So he and I learn from him now. He tells me about that research. But it does validate what we know about expertise. But it's not just expertise. It's true of all of us. I think we have to work very hard to actually take control over the decisions that we make. And now I'm becoming very interested in how to get people to the point where they can control their own decisions, where they're not making them based on their habits in the past. Because as you know, we can all make bad decisions. I mean, we have all learned that. And the older we are, the better we've learned it. I hope. There are people that never learn, and I feel bad for them. But the bottom line here is that we can automate the wrong way to do something. We can automate things that are not helpful for us, because when we automated them, they worked. But they don't continue to work often. And society changes. What we need people to decide or do changes over time. And we have a difficult time. We can persuade people to do something new, but that doesn't mean that they're going to do it, not because they don't want to, but because this automated behavior, this automated knowledge they had just pushes them into their old behavior before they realize it. I was talking to a psychologist today about how to get people to follow the rules, the new rules in supermarkets. We all have to wear masks, and we have to only take the same route up and down the rows in a market so that we're not bumping into each other and trading the virus. Well, people don't respect it. And then people get angry. They have fights. And I'm wanting to say that, wait a minute, these people that are going the wrong way, they're just automated. They may want to do it right, but they forget because they're not really thinking about it. They're just doing what they always did. So we have to take that into effect. And I think schools, governments have to be aware of how to unautomate things that no longer work before we re-automate something that will work better given what the requirements are today. We call it unlearning. 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 And my take is that it's almost as important now as learning. We've had 2 grants to have unlearning conferences at my university. Some foundations and the Zuckerbergs, the people with Facebook, have funded it. And we brought the top experts around the world, and we summarized it. Here's the strategies that we know about right now that helps people unlearn things. And by the way, that includes things that are harmful to people, not just behaviors that turn out to get them into trouble, but things like post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
I mean, that's a terrible thing for people that have had a bad experience. They have a traumatic accident or something, and then for years afterwards, the wars, oh God forbid, the wars are terrible, especially for soldiers. And so or people that are in the middle of a war as citizens, that's very hard on them. And we want them to be able to, if not forget, at least not be controlled by the terror that they experienced when they had a traumatic experience.
Right.
So that's one of our problems that we're trying to solve now, is the unlearning problem. We've gotten some insights about it that are kind of interesting.
So the unlearning process is also one of the many ways that to control.
Yes, to control what you do.
You do, and the automated decision-making process, and you control it, and then deliberately to get rid of something that the old patterns that you have been used to. You foster habits during the past that your life experience.
You know who's most interested in this now are people in clinical psychology, people that deal with people who have psychological problems. They are very heavily invested in this approach because they're very interested. They realize that most of the people they see in psychotherapy are people that have behaviors that are hurting them and they can't change them or don't. And so the question is not just can you motivate them to change? That's part of the problem. But the bigger problem is once they're motivated, how do they go about doing that if the thing that's hurting them, that's causing trouble in their life, is something that's automated?
You just said that 70% of all our decisions are unconscious. And
Yes.
does that reflect or match what I mean, in percentile wise, like the portion of short-term memory and long-term memory, like the short-term memory is like 30% or long-term memory is 70%?
I think that's something that I ought to be cautious about because I don't think there's good evidence. That's a great question, but I don't think there's good evidence about the answer to the question. But I was talking to a colleague at Carnegie Mellon University. They do a lot of work in this area also. Matter of fact, Carnegie Mellon did a cognitive task analysis on people that were expert at cognitive task analysis, which I thought was very interesting. But their view is that that adults particularly have a huge amount of automated knowledge. And the older we become, the more of it we have. And how much of it there is, their view is that the best estimate right now is that 70% of our long-term memory is automated and unconscious. We haven't actually studied that question with people except as experts.
Right. How human brain works is always a mystery to all of us.
Well, it's a mystery that people are trying to unravel and will continue for a very long time because it's a very complex problem.
Exactly. Just like the quantum mechanics and the parallel world, probably that's another mystery and area that.
But we know a lot about it, and we know things that would be really helpful to people in training, and those things are not well known by people in training.
Exactly. The first step to solve the unknowns to know what we don't.
Yes. And one of the things that attracted me to task analysis, which is the first thing you do in training, is that if you look at American training design systems, you'll find that they are the most sketchy and the most incomplete at the front end in task analysis.
I think so. It's the same with the Chinese too.
So what happens if you don't have the information that somebody needs to learn what they need to know when they finish training? Well, the best training in the world is not going to make a difference if we're not training the correct things, right?
Exactly.
So I'm wanting to move back to the beginning and make sure at least there that we do it correctly.
Right. So the CTA, cognitive task analysis, tell us a little bit about its application, its significance to the real world.
Let me say one thing. Let me say one other thing quickly first, because if anybody looks on the internet for cognitive task analysis, they will learn what we did, which is there are over 100 different strategies to do cognitive task analysis. It's like active learning, okay? And only 6 of those are actually effective. And out of those 6, only 3 actually produce much change at all. And so if you're going to do or learn about cognitive task analysis, you really need to focus on one of the 3 types that are the most effective.
What are they?
Well, rather than going into them individually, what I could do is make available a meta-analysis that someone did that came up with those. But luckily, our system, the one we developed at USC, is one of the 3 most effective. And since we have trained many people to do that, we have a doctoral program now where that is one of the options for people getting a doctorate in education and in training. It's run by a colleague of mine, Professor Yates, Ken Yates at USC, and he's had huge success with it. So he teaches the approach to master's and doctoral students. They go out and do a cognitive task analysis for their dissertation, do research on it.
Yes, Dr. Yates, Y-E-T-S.
Yates, Y-A-T-E-S.
Yes,
Y-A-T-E-S.
Robert Yates, yeah.
Ken, K-E-N, Kenneth Yates. He and I have collaborated on this now for well, what, 12, 14 years together?
Years, yeah.
So
Great.
we're a team.
Yeah. Because the
I don't
reason
try to
I
do anything by myself anymore. You know, it's really always better to work with a team of
may
people.
ask you, may I ask you, how old are you now, sir?
I'm 79.
Almost 80.
I'll be 80 in a couple of months, actually.
Well, you are 80 by Chinese count because everybody, when they're born, they're 1 year old in Chinese count.
Well, that's why we should do it too. We don't count the womb for some reason, but we should.
Well, 80 years is a big celebration, and
Yeah, and my family's been wonderful. So I'm happy. But what I'm happier about is I'm still energetic. I have most of my mind remaining. I mean, I don't have Alzheimer's or one of those terrible diseases, and for now I'm doing fine. I'm looking for a few more years, hopefully.
God bless. God bless. I think that you are studying cognitive how brain works, and here you go.
Yeah.
That's a good example. Keep ourselves alive. I mean, just
exactly.
keep
Keep your
thinking,
mind alive.
Alive. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The reason I want to ask about the short-term memory and long-term memory, because we run into that a lot. And in China, you know, very few scholars like yourself, and then studying into psychology in that depth. And there are a lot of them, very excellent scholars there are in China. But in the industry, I mean, the application part of side of it, there's very few people know this.
See, this is the challenge, isn't it? To find people who will translate that excellent research into a form that can be used by people who are trying to apply it. And I think that's one of the great missing components in all of this, is that we're not doing a good job at that.
Is that situation happening in the United States for
I don't
now?
think we're doing a very good job of it. No, nowhere. And by the way, when I say translate, I don't mean from one language to another.
I know.
I mean from the research form of something to the application form.
Exactly.
And that's one thing I've tried to do. What I didn't say when I talked about my background is that I realized I wasn't going to make much money as a professor. I didn't care for many years. But as I started to get older, I started to realize, oh, wait a minute, you're going to have to take care of yourself when you're older. I started a company. It's called Atlantic Training Incorporated. And I began to take clients. So I designed training and training systems and measurement systems and all these things for businesses and for governments, not only in this country, but in Europe. And so I've seen this also from the side of the people who are actually out there working in businesses trying to train. And so I kind of know more than most researchers do about what they need to know. What are they looking for in order to make an application? And it's not just how to do it, it's why. Convince me that this is a benefit if I do it differently and learn how to do this.
Wow. So I would say that that's your application lab that you took.
Yeah, that's what our center tried to do, because we actually in the research center we actually took jobs from companies and governments to go out and design something. For example, we were asked to redesign the training for the people that examine patent applications in Europe when the European Union formed. And that was an interesting challenge. It wasn't a business, it was a semi-government office, but they measured, they did a good job. Germans measure everything. They tend to be more measurement focused than some other people are. And so we had a pretty good idea of what they were doing before we started. We knew how long it took to train, and we knew what they were doing afterwards. And we had quite an impact, a huge impact, actually. So that's important to me, is that what we do ultimately has to pay off in practice, in practical terms.
Exactly. So how many countries have you worked in?
Well, you know, I think somebody asked me that for something that they were doing here a year or two ago, and I think I came up with 14 different countries.
Have you found, the reason I'm asking, have you found any cultural differences in CTA, as you mentioned earlier?
No. Here's the problem. Even my knowledge of German, which was my university training, is not good enough to do a CTA in German. So I've only done it in English, but I've done it in different countries, and we find the same thing in every country. We find some surprising things. For example, if you take a top expert and you can prove they're a top expert by showing data that they are consistently successful, and we do a cognitive task analysis, we've learned a few things. First of all, you only have to talk to about 3 or 4 of them to find out how they do it. You don't have to talk to 50 of them or 30 of them. Second thing we find out is all those 3 people or 4 people think they do things differently. They don't. They do it very similarly. So what we're trying to do is capture sort of some approximation of the way that the 3 or 4 of them do it and put it in words that trainees will understand. The third thing we learned was that some of those experts think it's absolutely necessary to do something that it turns out not to be necessary to do at all. Because the other experts who succeed don't do it and succeed very well. And this was even true in surgery, where surgeons will train their students, you must do this in the surgery. And we found out, no, it doesn't help. They don't have to do it. And they might actually be risking a patient if they did do it. We call those superstitious steps. Steps they tell you to do that turn out to be superstitious because they don't work. They're not necessary. But generally, they don't hurt either, generally.
That's what I call what I found out in my training experience, that is sometimes it's disastrous for experts to train. And especially the rookies, especially the rookies.
And yet there's, I think 80% of all trainers in the world are subject matter experts.
Right.
Our training magazine made that estimate a few years ago. I don't know how accurate it is. It may be accurate for the United States. I mean, I would be interested. I wish your training magazine would do what ours does, which was every year they did a survey of all of their members and asked questions about what was going on in training. It was the only way in this country that we knew what was happening in business training organizations or even government training organizations.
There's other organizations such as ATT. They're only interested in business application world. What's a big spending? They came up the SWOT, the State of Industry report. So the SWOT.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but don't really worry too much about government or schools or that sort of thing.
No, they have the different sectors included, but not not on the study side, research side. How many of them are. I think there might be some data in that, but I mean, not to mention that in China there's no ATT organizations. Things alike in China, the corresponding body in China, but the training magazine in China is big, but I would suggest them to do the same thing. Conduct either industry research. They do somehow, but on the research side that we do need to include. I think based on what you have described is necessary because it laid the foundation how human brain works. Because at the end of the day, learning happens here instead of.
That's right.
Doesn't matter what media, as you earlier said. I will come back to that. It doesn't matter what medium you're going to use or who's going to. Physically or behaviorally, they're in action or not. Learning happens here.
That's right. And we did learn a great deal about how to make that happen. And for example, one of the things we realized we needed when we were doing cognitive task analysis is a way to distinguish between different kinds of knowledge. Here's an example: facts, concepts, processes, principles, procedures. We had to have a system so that when we heard an expert say something, we'd ask, is this expert talking about a process, how something works? Or are they talking about a step in a procedure? Or are they talking about a concept, something that has a definition and different examples that exists in this work setting? So we had to have these different knowledge types, and we found them by looking at the knowledge about the evidence about memory and about learning. And we find that there's good evidence that these are actual types of knowledge that are recognized in the brain by everybody, in every culture, in every setting that we could find. So that knowledge type system that we developed turns out to be a great benefit to us, not only in cognitive task analysis, but it turns out The way you teach people facts is different than the way you teach them concepts, is different than the way you teach a process, is different than the way you teach a principle, and certainly different than the way you teach steps in a procedure.
That reminds me that when I learned instructional system design, the phase 2 of that was we used a textbook. That book was written by Smith Reagan. And
Smith
then
and
they
Reagan, yep.
Smith and Reagan, then they
Yep.
distinguished between those, different types of knowledge teaching. How do you teach facts, and how do you teach concepts and principles and processes and procedural learnings,
Yep.
and everything. All the cognitive procedures are different, even though minute, but they have huge significance in application significance in the real world. I mean, especially for business, because it's like steering. If you set the direction wrong, and then where the end result you got is multi-million dollars and loss financially.
Yeah.
And it's not only a financial loss, but also loss of confidence and motivation, which one we're going to come back
That's
to.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I try to argue with people who are trying to accomplish this, that while it takes a little bit more time at the front end to design training that's evidence-based, the benefit is at the back end when the trainees take much less time to learn. They're much more able to perform accurately and effectively when they finish training. And if you spread that cost out over many people, it turns out to be much cheaper to do evidence-based work and much more effective for the organization.
In your view, in the real world, shall we do the cognitive CTA? Shall the businesses, enterprises, companies, they do CTA, or how they should do it, or how they apply it in the real world? Because everybody's asking, quick, fast, and easy. Cheaper, faster, and better.
I know. And cheaper and better is good. Faster is a question that begs for definition. Do you want it to be faster to get the course up and running, or do you want it to be faster for people to learn and operate extremely effectively after they finish? Not only that, when you do things with cognitive task analysis, upgrading a course, updating it is very easy, because it turns out that things can change in a setting where people are working, but modifying the training to accommodate those changes is so much easier if you've been very precise, which you are with cognitive task analysis.
Does when we conduct CTA, is that similar to what we identify what the target audience's entry knowledge are? Is that similar?
Well, that's actually a challenge in CTA, because we have to capture the knowledge at the level where we think most entry-level people would be when they learn. Does that make sense? So that's a real challenge, because we can't predict that exactly. But there's ways to deal with that. This is a very complex question. We may not have time to talk about it, but it's a very important question that you raised. And there are ways to take care of this so that you present instruction at the level where people can actually learn efficiently and quickly from it. But that can only be done with cognitive task analysis. And actually, it was the Australians that developed a way to do it. There's really good work going on in a variety of countries now. And I find the more that I try to keep track of training research in many different countries, the more I learn. Some countries are working on problems that other countries are ignoring.
At a higher point, can I say that CTA is a process of identifying what okay, I'm fleshing out.
Let me try it. Let me try a definition. It's a process that allows you through interview to capture how top experts do something in a way that permits you to pull that knowledge into a training course and speed up the expertise development of students.
Thank you. Exactly. Thank you for the definition. That's exactly what CTA should be. And the CTA is so in other words, once we get the CTA done right, and then later on everything is just follow suit. I mean, I mean, just
Yeah, then you have what's changed and okay, let's go to this area in that course and we'll pull that out and we'll insert how do we do this new thing.
That's when instructional system design and everything kicks in.
That's right. Well, we're getting better at it. You know, here it's a long process of development.
It is. And then earlier on, you also mentioned evidence-based, and then you're big time in it. And evidence-based, my wife was trained as a doctor, and I always hear from her that evidence-based. So evidence-based is that a word from the medical world? I mean, or
well, I hear it. It's probably the medical world got into it earlier than many other professions. Because the consequence of being wrong was so much more obvious and drastic. But you know, physicians who are historians, I'm a historian, remember I started out in history, so I'm so interested in the history of fields. 150 years ago, physicians in this country used to grow most of their drugs in their garden. You know, they used to go out and pick things and, you know, it's like Chinese medicine still very effectively does a lot of that. Yeah. I mean, the old Chinese medicine. And as a friend of mine who's a historian of medicine says, doctors knew exactly pretty much when you were going to die. They just didn't know how to keep you from dying of whatever it is that you had. They could tell you how the illness was going to progress. They just couldn't do much of it. And that's where we are. We know a lot about who's going to learn and who's not and how to make a pretty accurate prediction, but we probably could learn a whole lot more about how to make them learn and how to help them be successful. That's what evidence will do. And that's how medicine grew. And there's whole kinds of stories about the introduction, the resistance to the introduction of evidence-based medicine in the world, all over the world.
And by evidence-based in learning, evidence-based learning means that we should adopt the most appropriate and then something that effective, proven effective.
Yep. If there is no research that helps a person make a decision about what to do next, then craft is the best way. Talk to people that have done it over and over again. Take their advice if you don't have your own experience. Mm-hmm. But if there's evidence, if you can see many different studies that have said this A is better than B, do A. It makes sense. But the problem is that most people are not trained to know A and B and what the evidence for them is. And that's why we have to do a better job of getting that information to people in a form that they can use.
It is. I mean, in the way that you describe it to me, it's the same thing, because when you ask somebody, you know, A works and B doesn't work, because when they say A works, that's unconscious knowledge.
Yeah. You know, and the hardest part of this, I think, George, is that in some companies particularly, they'll try something in training and they think it works really well. It may or may not have, but they get very excited about it. And let's say it worked okay, at least enough to make them happy. Well, then a person in a different company says, oh, they use this thing, let's us use it. So they ask, what did you do? Well, we did active learning. Oh, what's that? Well, people have to be active. That's all they hear. So, okay, they go and they try to make people active in learning. It doesn't work. And then they get all upset. And they say, I tried to use evidence-based learning. No, you didn't. Sorry, you just tried to mimic what somebody else thought they did and may not have ever done in the first place.
Yep. Wow, that's so much for the cognitive CTA, cognitive learning block. And then in your early years, you have conducted so many research on cognitive thinking, and then you were interested in media. How does it carry? I mean,
Well, actually, my interest in media turned out to be very early. I know when it happened. I was in undergraduate school and we were asked to read a study. And the study was about how to teach the resistance codes on resistors as you're training electricians. Okay, there was a printed code, colors and stripes and so on resistors to show what value they had. Well, here was the study. The codes were in color. Color was a very important part of it. And the study was, can you train these things in color as well as black and white? So I said, oh, it's got to be color. if the codes themselves are in color, they'd have to have color to train them. No, they didn't. And I said, I can't believe this. This is wrong. These people are stupid. I'm going to go find this research. I'm going to talk to the people that do it. And I'm going to try to find out what's wrong. And once I started to dig into it, I was lost. I got interested in doing those kinds of studies. One thing led to another. And I left journalism for learning research that was focused on technology. And I'm still extremely interested in how you teach with technology.
What year was that? Like in the 1980s?
Oh no, I got my doctorate in 1980. So this would have been probably 1978, maybe 1977, sometime around there.
Because you said earlier
the study was done by the military, I remember. You know, they were interested in training electricians in the military, so they were doing the research. But it was published in one of the ed tech journals.
And because you said that in the 1980s, you published an article, very important article that showing.
Well, I got so interested in technology, I figured that different media probably had different benefits for different students and different subject matter. So I decided to take a whole year off from all other work and read every bit of research on the use of media to train or teach. And I did. I walked into my office early in the morning and I walked out in the evening, and I worked all day reading and looking and so on. And what I realized with all that reading was that the research did not support any benefit at all for media on learning. Things were quicker, things were more available when you use certain media, but they were not more effective for learning. And I published an article, and that was where that analogy was led off that article about, remember the grocery truck delivering groceries to the market was not responsible for the nutrition of a neighborhood. That got a lot of attention.
Yeah, I think I really wish that your idea was translated or introduced in China in the late 1990s, because in the right after the millennium, that's when e-learning or technology-enabled learning started to be recognized by the Chinese companies, especially the big name companies in China, and they invested in millions of dollars in building the platform, you know, the technology side. And then I was working for US West, one of the Bell companies, and we worked with Mark Rosenberg. You know Mark?
Oh yeah, I know Mark Rosenberg.
Oh yeah, he's very big in e-learning, and he always said, E is not important, the learning is important. He always say that, but people don't listen. And when I came back to China, and I tell those companies, and I joked with them, I said, what do you build us a big, huge LMS for, the learning management system for, or LCMS for? You've used them for barbecuing or something? You know, you gotta have something valuable, or, you know, cognitively, or you really produce value to the job, to the positions, and change behavior, instead of get shining, and then you got those ribbon cutting ceremonies and big potatoes and came, and then everybody forgets about it.
You know what was the most compelling evidence for me was that when we tested the same course taught on a medium and taught in the classroom live, that we only found differences in learning when different teachers taught both the things. If the same teacher taught the classroom, who then helped us design the media-based, and it could be on computer, it didn't necessarily show the teacher, but used the same strategies, the learning was identical. Why would that be, we said? Oh, maybe because it's not the media, maybe because it's the instructional strategy that's used. So that was yet another bit of evidence that we always show to people, and they say, well, you haven't done it here. You know, there's this, it hasn't been invented here, so it doesn't work here. It's hard to convince people still.
It is. Even nowadays, do you think?
Oh, yeah, I do. I'm sorry. I think it's easier to do it in education than it is in business. Business is a lot more resistant to it. And
Right.
they should be the ones eagerly grabbing it because it has financial benefit to them. I used to
Right.
think business was practical. They gauge things by how much money they made. Well, it turns
Right.
out, no, they actually don't. They just
And
like to
then
be right.
they just want to be right.
I think
Hmm.
so. I think there's a heavy, don't try to change my mind because I know I'm right. I'm confident about my views.
Right. That's what we found out in our book. In our book, what we found out, management, the logic of management. What we found out is all about calculation.
Yeah.
Management actually doesn't have anything to do with people in the first place. People are important, but it's all about mathematics. Management is mathematics, and the
Yeah.
way you should do it and how you should do it. They're all arithmetic equations. And then the second part is you need people to do that, and then motivation, team building, atmosphere, everything kick in. And then that's a combination, the yin yang principles. How do we we'll come back to that. The yin yang principles, they form a unity one. So anyway, still linger on media, because the media is so important, and they have so much implications for the organizations, because media, as earlier we said, that they're fast, they're easy, and they cover huge areas, including huge numbers of people. So what is the downside of media learning or the cyber learning? Because nowadays, due to the pandemic, everybody going online and, learning, working together, and now we're on Zoom.
Well, I think the downside is maybe that we're too quickly doing on computers or in front of a video camera, what we were doing in the classroom. And teachers can't, or trainers can't see the people that they're teaching when they're on the media most of the time, because a lot of this teaching, as we call it, asynchronous. There's no direct link between the student and the teacher, and if there is, it's not a visual link. Teachers get used to watching students carefully to see how they're reacting. And the cues that students give are quite different in different cultures, I think. But if you don't have a synchronous connection between the technology and the teacher and the student, I think it's much more difficult to do it well. Not impossible, but more difficult. You can teach a lot of conceptual knowledge, theories, that sort of thing, but it's very difficult to teach people how to do things, including things like mathematics or writing or reading, just simply with asynchronous instruction. You have to have an interaction. Teachers have to watch somebody doing something, or the computer has to, and correct them if they go off in the wrong direction.
So nowadays, e-learning or technology-enabled learning or cyber learning, in China has been 20 years now. And we have gone different ways. We have gone many wrong directions, and we paid huge. One of the prize that we paid, in China, the learning community paid, is that people don't believe in, mobile learning, learning by cell phone, and just people think, so what, because been there, done that. And I learned, our company has LMS, online courses, and I learned nothing about it. I learned nothing from it. And so, they're less motivated to learn from those mobile devices, from their iPads or their, laptops. So I think that's what you just said is a great advice to some of the some of the learning development communities, that to pay attention. And media is not important, but learning happens here.
Yep. And it can be done with different media very effectively. The fact that they haven't experienced it being done doesn't mean that it can't happen. That's the hard thing to convince people. They quickly dismiss it, as you say, if they see a bad example of it, particularly if they've been forced to sit through a bad example of it. And you have to find analogies of other things in their lives that they first thought didn't work, but found out later that they did. That's very
Right.
powerful with people. Get them to
Right.
tell you an example of a time in their life when, well, somebody said this thing was wonderful and I tried it and it was a complete failure. Well, then later, somebody came back to me who I trusted a lot and said, would you give it another chance? Because there's this other way to do it. And I did it and it was wonderful, or at least it worked very much better. Now think of that. So don't judge a thing just because it didn't work once. It wasn't the thing, it wasn't the instructional design part of it that's going to make the difference. That was bad. The media stays the same, but the design has changed in this new thing. That's what makes the difference.
Thank you. Exactly. I always emphasize, instructional system design as a design is not instructional system development, because in Chinese, in the Chinese language, I mean, development is so huge, and then they always say course development. No, I said, no, it's not called course development, it's course design. And you design exactly what, how, and what the learner, your target audience need to learn.
Yep. I find it also helps to describe some of the research on learning, the cognitive processes that interfere with learning. For example, you talked about short-term and long-term memory. Short-term memory is a very small space. We are all born with the same short-term memories. Some of us are more effective than others, but that's just individual differences in the same culture. There's no differences between cultures with how our minds are formed. And our working memory, our thinking memory, is very small. We can only think about 3 or 4 things at one time. And if we're anxious or distracted, 1 or 2 of those things goes away. So thinking is extremely limited during training. So you can't distract people with things that are not totally focused on the task that they're learning about. And that they can then gradually see as they pay attention that they're getting benefit from it, that they're actually learning something that might be valuable.
Right. In our real world, in the daily operations, I mean, training the operations, actually, media played a role of distractor. And
it can, yeah. All these videos that people love, they say, oh, we'll show them a video. Well,
flashy, shining,
Yeah, there's a fellow in Santa Barbara, California, who one of the professors there, Richard Mayer, he's the one that does the multimedia books. Those books are valuable because he lists all of the strategies we've gotten out of research that helps people who are making presentations, who are doing videos, who are designing instruction that's going to be presented in a visual way, and so on and so forth. And it's, here's what works, and here's what you shouldn't do. And here's the benefit that you get in learning if you use this.
Right.
Richard Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R.
Yep, I know him.
I really like his work. Yep.
I really do, Richard Mayer. Just want to comment on that. Earlier on, you went to Indiana University, and there are different instructional design programs and learning and psychology. And Indiana is so well known in the media development, in the media education. Florida State, where Rogers and Roger Kaufman and those people are, Bob Gagne, they're more in the theory, and Indiana University is very much into media education. So that's why. Yep. So I want to talk a little bit about, because we're talking about media, and I want to talk about a little bit about AI, the thing that you're working on, and then we will switch to motivation. And then the AI, I want to say a little bit of my recognition is that, my reckoning is that I don't think training in the future will work. I mean, will exist at all, because of the AI movement and the AI advancement. Like people like Elon Musk and Paul Allen and deceased Paul Allen, those people, they're changing the world. They're changing, and they are changing the world if they are successful in the future. I mean, learning is a matter of, to me, is a matter of a long-term memory and building, people's long-term memory from short-term memory to long-term memory, and then they can make decisions on the go, and then they can have multiple pattern recognitions and capabilities, and then it's automated decision making. So if the process can be automated in the future, like just like, oh, I need a USB 20, you know, and then so, okay, George, you need to become a pilot right now in next half hour. So, and then here's a 5G of all the memory that to be a pilot, and then go ahead and download it. So I open up my ear and then download the USB 20. So it's like the RoboCop, you know, in the sci-fi movies, you know, the half man, half machine, those type of things. So do you think it will actually happen in the future? Because that way training is automatically kind of just fade away.
I can't comment about whether we're going to be able to upload or download things into people's brains, but there are people with a lot of resources who are hoping that and investing effort. It's not going to happen certainly in our lifetime if it happens.
No, you won't.
Artificial intelligence, teaching a computer to have the same kind of expertise as people, that will happen. And that's happening rapidly. And I think any country that's not out in the forefront of that is going to be way behind when it hits hard. And I'm with you. By the way, my view is a radical view now in this country. I mean, because I totally agree with you, the training is going to be artificially intelligently based. But expertise won't be. You know, I think at some point you have to ask, what's the purpose of the human mind? What do we do best? And routine is not what we do best. What we do best is solve novel problems. There's no routine for that we know of. I mean, I know people will tell you they know something about creativity. Believe me, I've looked at the research on creativity. We don't know much at all about it. But we do it. And so what I'm thinking is that we should spend our time solving problems that haven't been solved. All problems that have been solved ought to be captured and by artificial intelligence and translated so that that people can be trained to do it. And human beings ought to spend their time as best they can trying to solve problems that haven't been solved and that are current, are new, novel. That's my take.
So creativity, I mean, if we look back throughout the history of human evolution, it's all about solving new problems.
Right.
Including AI.
And I think it's one of the reasons why Homo sapiens have succeeded so well. You know, people actually try to study the intelligence of Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon and so on. And one of the things they determined that people that preceded, you know, human forms that preceded Homo sapiens probably were very good at procedures, at learning how to do things step by step and repeating them. For example, Neanderthals made the same tools for over 1 million years, and they made them almost identical. We know that because they've survived. But what they apparently weren't very good at doing is inventing new strategies, inventing new approaches.
Right. Animals can use tools too.
They can.
And, they can.
But it tends to be the smarter of the animals, like crows, for example. Even birds use tools.
Right.
But they haven't developed physics yet.
No.
Okay.
Not even language. All right.
So
I mean, they can transcend. So let's switch a little in observation of time. I want to quickly switch to motivation a little bit. And you talked about cognitive task analysis and the media learning, and so those are very important roles in our learning development. And how about motivation? You know, you have to motivate people to, but psychologically, does those two areas have anything to do with motivation? They do, right?
Oh yes, I think they do, definitely. You know, in this country, we've spent a lot of time on learning and instruction and research and almost no time on motivation. There's reasons for that we won't go into. There's good historical reasons. But what's happening now is that different really fine researchers are looking at different areas of motivation, but nobody is pulling it together enough. So that's what I tried to do, along with a couple of colleagues. My colleague, Boris Saxberg, has been a real companion in doing this. And he and I developed this attempt to intertwine the different threads of motivation research into a framework that could be used by people at work or people that are doing instruction, including teachers. And do you want me to briefly describe the system? I can do it in just a minute or so.
Oh, please.
All right, look, what we found out was that there are three things that define motivation. If you're motivated, you'll start something. And you will persist once you've started it until you finish it, not get distracted. And third, you'll invest enough mental effort to succeed, because most work is cognitive now, not physical. And so those are the three things that define motivation. There are four things that we find that influence starting, persisting, and investing enough effort. The first is the values that people have. Does this have value for me or for my work group, for whoever I identify with? If it's not me as an individual, it's certainly my family or my work group. Second thing is, can I do it? Can I learn how to do it? And if I learn it, will I be permitted to do it? In other words, will I be blocked from applying this knowledge? That sounds strange, but in a lot of work settings, you're actually prevented from doing what'll work. I have plenty of examples of that. It's not intentional, but it happens.
Yep.
The third thing is what's my emotion right now? People may be very good at hiding their emotions, but when they're angry, they're depressed, they're frightened, if it's a very strong emotion, they're not going to be motivated. And it doesn't have to be emotion that comes from work. It can be things that are happening at home. A child is sick, whatever it is. It's a very big distraction for people at work, and it prevents them from being motivated. The fourth thing happens to even the most motivated people. And that is, sometimes they'll hit a bump where they think that they're doing good work, but they get feedback that they're not doing well. And let's say the feedback is accurate. Let's say it comes from an assessment system that's very accurate. The person trusts it. Well, once that happens to people and they get information that's contrary to their expectations about who they are and what they can do, they tend to not have motivation to do that anymore. They feel that they've lost control of this skill that they thought they had so that they should succeed. And there's a solution to that. What they have to do is believe that they do have control. They just have to work harder at it. They misjudged this task. They thought it looked like an old task, that they were good at it, but it turns out that this new task is different, and they have to learn a different way to deal with it. That's it. That's a fairly simple system.
Exactly.
It's about what they believe, what they expect, and about what they feel they're able to control.
Emotions and feedbacks. Yep. You earlier on, you also mentioned the BACS model, the belief, expectancy, and control.
Expectancy and control. That's the one I just described.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is, right? Okay. Great. And,
by the way, one of the things going on here in high school is that one of our researchers has come up with a strategy for trying to convince children that their intelligence is not as important as they were led to believe. That intelligence is changeable, that if they work hard, they can achieve much more than they think. And so what's important is effort, because with effort, you build more intelligence, you learn more, you're able to do more. And in an intervention that takes about 15 minutes, she gets huge impact on the learning and the motivation of students.
Oh yeah,
Because kids are taught that intelligence is everything, and a lot of adults believe it also. Well, it's important. There's no doubt about it, but it's not a limit. What limits you is what you can control, which is the effort that you invest. You can't control your intelligence. You can't control what you were born with. What you can control is how hard you work, how focused you are. And once a child is convinced of that and is willing to work hard, they're going to succeed much more than they would otherwise.
I saw a lot of good movies, like, one of the movies is played by Sean Connery. He's writer. He was very successful earlier on. It's a motivational movie. And this in Brooklyn, this black kid, and African American kid, and he was he was distracted, he was discouraged by his family, but he's just like writing. And then he found this old guy, doing the daily chore, and then happens to be the guy that he was very successful. And his picture is hung his hand in their classroom. It's one of those guys. And then that's the old guy. And then they learned, they became pal. And later on, this guy was this young kid became very successful in writing by the mentorship of that successful writer.
See, that happens every day in school, I think.
Cool.
We have notions in different countries about what women are capable of doing. Well, they're capable of doing everything that men are, with a couple of exceptions that aren't that important for learning, and what minorities can or can't do. And they begin to believe that if they learn something, remember I said you have to be convinced that you can do it, you can learn it, you can perform it, but you also have to be convinced that you'll be permitted to do it. We don't think women can learn math in this country. I don't care what anybody says. There's a great belief that that young women are not good at mathematics, when in fact they're as good as they're as skillful as anybody else. But that affects their motivation, both to become mathematicians, and that's the problem. Not their learning, but their beliefs about what they're capable of.
Yeah, that reminds me that African American lady, she got the President's Freedom Award. She was one of the mathematicians that worked on NASA program that put human on the moon.
Yep. Yeah, and that shouldn't be a surprise. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but it is because of bigoted beliefs about blacks and about minorities.
Shall I call that empowerment? I mean, motivation to let people know.
Yeah, it's kind of an empowerment system, because it says that if you believe that you can control what you do, you will be more motivated to do it. You have to believe you can learn it and you can apply it and you can succeed at it. That's what control means. And if you become even a bit convinced that you may not be able to control it, you're not going to be motivated.
Does that tell us a little bit about the yin-yang principle application in the motivational part? Because the yin-yang principle is I think is more attractive to our Chinese audiences.
Nobody has, we don't have enough Chinese in this country, okay? Nobody actually got interested in that piece, and I liked it. There's a cognitive phenomenon that almost nobody knows about, and it's this. As you begin to, here's the yin part of it. All right. As you begin to put things out there and challenge people, their effort increases. All right. You can't get people to work unless they're challenged. Well, they can challenge themselves, but let's set that aside for a moment. Even when they challenge themselves, the way they motivate themselves is to give themselves challenges in areas that they are interested in. So as you increase effort, you increase learning with challenge until a certain point. And the point is that when investing more effort does not lead to success, your mind stops learning, even without you deciding to do that. And it goes into kind of a stasis, a state where you're kind of a little unconscious, and it's very pleasurable when that happens. So it's not painful, very pleasurable, and you stop learning at that point. That's the yang part. That's the other part. So the more you overwhelm people with irrelevant stuff, the more you fill up their working memory with video and great music and little figures dancing across the screen and all these things that we do now in training, the more that you load people's minds with things that just causes them to stop learning when they reach a point where they fill up their working memory. Your mind, your cognitive plan is set up to keep from overloading your working memory. It shuts down your learning, it shuts down your effort, it lowers your motivation when you reach it. So you can have all this yin stuff coming in, a lot of activity, and then bang, you hit some kind of a threshold, and you begin to we call it daydreaming. I mean, there's all kinds of words in different phrases in different languages and different cultures to describe that state. But it's that state where you go from yin to yang. And yang is not as productive because you're not learning anymore. You've stopped. You may look like you are, but you're not.
That's where the point that you got, what we describe it is called the daydreaming, glass eyeing, and you're here, not, but not here. You're here, not here, as we earlier
That's
said.
it. That's it.
So they're somewhere else. And that's because they stopped learning their motivational part. They have psychologically, their self-control is they have been loaded with all these magnificent challenges. And that's the yin part. They're motivated to learn. And then that's what we call the threshold, but I call it a tipping point or something like a break-even, point. And then
that's a tipping point was not a phrase that was around when I did that article, but that's what I would call it now. That's definitely a tipping point. Where we have a saying in English: the straw that broke the camel's back. All right.
Oh yeah.
One more irrelevant thing, and boom, somebody stops learning at that point. So that was the argument I made about yin and yang.
Mm-hmm. So you call it the stage that they stopped learning the yin part, right?
It's protective. It's mothering. It's protecting the person from overloading their working memory. See, it's self-protection.
Yep. So our brain actually is not an outside factor, exterior factor, but it's internal factor that the brain instinctively they're protecting ourselves and becoming overloading.
It's like an electrical fuse.
Yep.
It's an electrical system to shut down when it's overloaded. So this yin and yang is about the fuse in cognition.
Right. One is there's a cognitive overload, and then it just automatically stopped it, and then becomes self-protective, and that became moved into the yang period. Yes.
One of the reasons that I did that was that I was reading a paper in the Netherlands out of respect for a Dutch psychologist who was retiring at the time. And I wanted to talk about research that had gone on in the Netherlands and Australia. The Australian fellow's name who took this and ran with it is a fellow named John Sweller. And Sweller developed something that's very hot right now in Europe and the United States. It's called cognitive load theory. And what it's about, it takes that rough idea, that yin and yang idea, and it talks about all of the irrelevant sources of knowledge that are provided when somebody's trained that causes them to shut down and not learn, that overloads their working memory with irrelevancies. And so a lot of what they talk about is how do you avoid that? What makes it happen? And how do you avoid it and achieve the goal that you have for learning and performance?
So the real world application for businesses and organizations and the leaders, they should be aware of the yin yang, where the tipping point is, and then try to avoid the yang part, but try to expand or elaborate on the yin part, and then to get more empower people. They're using language or different formats or different media to empower people, to let them know and to inject motivational factors into their neurological system.
Exactly.
Okay. So if I had time, well, I would ask you, how do we do that in the real world? But in the observation of time, maybe we can.
Well, I actually think it's an interesting question, but it's probably a question for another conversation, because I would quickly say, go read the work of Richard Mayer.
Richard Mayer, yeah.
He has a huge list of things that cause that problem in media, in video, in computer-based instruction and televised instruction and so on.
Of course. Okay. Thank you. This is a really great, great insight and great insight in science. One of the last questions that Dick, I want to ask you about is right now, the pandemic. Of course, we cannot avoid it because this is still going on. Do you think that this pandemic will create any significant impact to our society as a whole because we think differently, or a cognitive, impact, any impact that you predict from science?
I actually, there's going to be all kinds of negative things happen, but I believe there'll be positive things too. And I believe that we really need to do more work with technology in education and training. And I think this is going to force us to turn some very intelligent people's minds to this problem of how do we do a better job of it. Because as the population of the world increases, we're going to have to more and more go to internet and computer-based and media-based instruction. And we need to do a better job of it. And by the way, we have fewer people to say no to us when we do technology-based instruction. So I see this as a time for reflection, for focusing on hard problems. I see a huge interest in this country. There's a movement started in America that's being called learning engineers.
Learning engineers, yes.
Learning engineers, a group of people from different fields: computer science, education, psychology, sociology, business, everything you can imagine. And they've gotten together to agree to have a discussion about what does it mean to be a learning engineer? What kinds of training needs to happen? As a matter of fact, there's a university, Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, has started an excellent master's degree program in learning engineering. And the attempt there, obviously, is to do what I think we ought to be thinking about during this time when we're encouraged to be solitary, we're encouraged to do more thinking, less talking, less, so on and so on. So I hope that's one of the best outcomes of this.
Thank you. What are your, this is an interview we conducted for our audiences in China, the learning and development community. Most of them are very young. What advice that you would give to them, the pandemic or pandemic-wise or non-pandemic-wise?
Well, if I were getting started again, I think I would use this opportunity to upgrade my education about what I am doing. There's a great deal to learn about training that I think would be perceived as valuable by future employers. And it's always going to be a very important part of what goes on in government and in business. So you're not held to one particular field. You can be a generalist, you can move around, you can do things that are interesting. One of the things that excites me is as I learn about new things, as I develop training, it's amazing what you learn, what you actually experience over time, what wonderful people you come in contact with. But the more they learn about their profession, the more they try to get degrees and certifications that are helpful to them, the more choices and chances they'll get to do the kind of work they want to do. And now is a great opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dick. And well, it's a very valuable 2 hours of conversation and learning from my side as well. And just a quick question on I see that on the back of your room and on the wall, there are two pictures. And one is a human brain and the other is a hand.
Well, it turns out I'm very interested in things that people believe in that don't work. People call them myths, or there's all kinds of names for them. I've written a lot about it. On my back wall, one of the brain is a picture of the brain, of the head, that was developed by people who developed a non-science they called phrenology back at the turn of the century. It meant you touched the bumps on a person's head and you could tell everything about them.
Right.
The hand is a hand that was developed by people that read the lines on your hand and tell your future and your past.
Palm reading.
Yeah. So that's one of the decorations on it. Reminds me that what I'm doing now may in the future be considered equivalent to palmistry or, phrenology. That I always have to worry about being as evidence-based as I can, not to commit some stupidity like that and mislead people down the wrong path.
And you won't be a superstitious learning either.
No, I hope not.
as we mentioned earlier. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, Dick. And I want to address you as a Dr. Clark on behalf of all our audiences and what you have done and what you are doing right now, especially in the AI venture is the future. And we wish you well, and we wish every success that you're gonna achieve in the future.
It's been an honor to be able to have this talk with you, George. Thank you so much. And I wish you and your colleagues in training in China all the best. I say again that somebody needs to write the history of how it is that you've made these huge strides in the last 35 to 40 years. This is a story for the ages, in my view. So I'm a great admirer of what you've accomplished. And so I'm doubly honored to be asked to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. And next time, we hope that you're going to be in China and conducting workshops or talk to us about the science.
I'd love to. I'd look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day, sir.
All the best to you and everybody there. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That gives you my interview with Dr. Richard Clark. He's really such a top psychological scientist in the world. It was a very intensive 2 hours of talk. We covered CTA, cognitive task analysis, media, and motivation, and also AI, artificial intelligence, which is the future. But you can see the future is based on science. He's such a top psychological scientist in our field, and he has won numerous awards. Our talk and his teaching is another proof that training is truly a science, and teaching and instruction is an art. Thank you, Dr. Clark. We'll keep in touch. Thank you for your leadership in this field. Next week, we're going to have the honor to interview Bill Wickenhorn. Probably you're not familiar with his name, but if I tell you where he worked, where he led, you probably know him right away. Yes, he was the president of Motorola University for 21 years, from 1981 to 2001. As probably you have known that Motorola is one of the very first multi or global companies to enter China. As early as 1992, they invested millions of dollars in Tianjin, TEDA area, the Tianjin Economic Development Area. Tianjin is also my hometown. So Motorola has been such a great name ever since. Its growth and development accompanied China's 40 years of opening up and development. Let's hear what Bill's story is, and see you next Wednesday. Thank you and good night.